Hello students, welcome to biology class. Let's start with the discussion of chapter Movements and Locomotion. The main objectives that we are covering in this video are movements and locomotion, skeletal system, the human skeleton and axial skeleton. Starting with the movements and locomotion. Change in position with respect to a definite point is called movement. When the movement takes place in body parts, these are called curvature movements. When the body as a whole moves from one place to another, these are called locomotory movements. Locomotory movements are very important in animal. These movements help the body to respond to the changes in both the external and internal environment. Movements in vertebrates are brought about by the three components of the body. Starting with the skeletal system. All the hard parts of the body that form supporting framework collectively constitutes the skeleton or skeletal system. Internal skeleton in vertebrates is made up of bones and cartilage. Now, bones, it is the hardest connective tissue. The matrix of the bone is very hard because of the presence of salts. Now, cartilage, this tissue is elastic, softer than bone. The matrix of cartilage is solid but elastic because of the presence of a protein called chondrin and some inorganic salts. Now, the ligaments. Ligaments are bands of tough elastic tissue around the joints. They connect bone to bone, give the joints support and limit their movements. In this image, we can see that ligaments join bone to bone and cartilage are the elastic or the soft bones, and bones form the hard skeletal system. Now, we are discussing types of skeletal system. There are two types of skeletal system, exoskeleton and endoskeleton. All the hard parts which are present on the outer surface of the body collectively constitutes the exoskeleton. So, the first point is present on outer surface of the body. Exoskeleton are always dead and they are ectodermal in origin. Example, shells, scale, feathers, claws, hair, nails, hooves, etc. are the parts of exoskeleton. Now, these are mostly formed by keratin proteins and they provide better protection against external injury. Now, moving on to the endoskeleton. All the hard parts, bones and cartilage which are present inside the body collectively constitutes the endoskeleton. Now, endoskeleton are always living. They are mesodermal in origin. It consists of bones and cartilage, and these are made up of both organic and inorganic compounds. It gives better support and permits better movement. Now, moving on to the functions of skeleton system. Skeleton performs many functions such as support. Bones serve as the supporting framework of the body. Next, shape. The bony framework provides and maintains the shape of the body. Protection. Hard bony boxes protect the delicate vital organs enclosed by them. For example, skull protects the brain and sense organs, and ribs protect the heart and the lungs. Next is movements. Bones with joint constitutes livers. Moreover, skeleton provides surface for the attachment of muscles and helps to bring about movements. Reservoirs. Bones serve as major reservoirs of calcium. Calcium is deposited and withdrawn according to the needs. It maintains the calcium level constant in the body. Next function is homeopoiesis. Production of blood corpuscles is known as homeopoiesis. Blood corpuscles are produced in the red bone marrow. Hearing. Ear ossicles, which are three tiny bones present in the middle ear, help in the hearing. Breathing. Sternum and ribs play a vital role in the process of breathing. Fat storage. Marrow cavity of long bones is full of bone marrow, which is made up of adipose tissue. The last function is paleontological importance. Bones, being hard, are usually preserved as fossils. Fossils provide us very authentic proof to trace the evolution of various animals. Now, next topic we are discussing here is human skeleton, that is an endoskeleton. Human skeleton is the internal framework of the human body. It is composed of around 270 bones at birth. This total decreases to around 206 bones by adulthood after some bones get fused together. The human skeleton can be divided into the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. Axial skeleton is formed by the vertebral column, the rib cage, the skull, and other associated bones. The appendicular skeleton, which is attached to the axial skeleton, is formed by the shoulder girdle, the pelvic girdle, and the bones of the upper and lower limbs. In this image, we can see the complete human skeleton. There are total 206 bones. Cartilage are also present, and the ligaments that joins one bone to another. In this image, we can see that there are 206 bones in the body. Now, skull comprises of 22 bones. Vertebral column comprises of 33 bones. Now here, the shoulder girdles with upper arms comprises of 64 bones, and pelvic girdle and lower limbs comprises of 62 bones. The thoracic cage consists of 25 bones. Now, moving on to the axial skeleton. Axial skeleton is the part of the skeleton that consists of the bones of the head and the trunk of the vertebrate. All the bones which are present along the median longitudinal axis of the body collectively constitutes the axial skeleton. In the human skeleton, it consists of 80 bones and is composed of 6 parts: the skull, ossicles of the middle ear, hyoid bone, the rib cage, sternum, and vertebral column. In this image, we can see the axial skeleton and appendicular skeleton. All the bones which are present along the median longitudinal axis of the body collectively constitutes the axial skeleton, and the bones that are attached to the axial skeleton constitutes the appendicular skeleton. In this image, we can see the parts of axial skeleton. Now, one by one, we are discussing human axial skeleton. Starting with the human skull. The human skull consists of the cranium and the facial bones. The cranium holds and protects the brain in a large space called the cranial vault. The cranium is formed from 8 plate-shaped bones which fit together at meeting points, joints called sutures. In addition, there are 14 facial bones which form the lower front part of the skull. Together, the 22 bones that compose the skull form additional smaller spaces beside the cranial vault, such as the cavities for the eyes, the internal ear, the nose, and the mouth. The most important facial bones include the jaw or mandible, the upper jaw or maxilla, the zygomatic or cheekbone, and the nasal bone. Now here we can see the bones of the skull that contains the cranial bones and the facial bones. Cranial bones, there are 8 bones, and facial skeleton consists of 14 bones. So total bones of the skull are 22. Now in this image we can see the facial skeleton. The face bones also form immovable joints except mandible, lower jawbone, which articulates the bones of the face, supports the upper part of respiratory and digestive tract. Face bones also provide sensory capsules for housing the sense organs. In this image, we can see the cranium. It is made up of 8 bones that form immovable joints called sutures between them. On the back part of the cranium is present a large hole called foramen magnum. Through this hole, the spinal cord continues from the brain into the vertebral canal of backbone. In this image, we can see the bones of the inner ear, the ear ossicles. The ear ossicles are 6 in number. These are very small bones. 3 ear ossicles, malleus, incus, and stapes, are present in each of the middle ear. These bones help in conveying sound waves from the external to the internal ear. Next is ribs. The rib cage is composed of 12 pairs of ribs and the sternum for a total of 25 separate bones. The ribcage functions as protection for the vital organs such as the heart and lungs. The ribs are shaped like crescents with one end flattened and other end rounded. The rounded ends are attached at joints to the thoracic vertebrae at the back, and the flattened ends come together at the sternum in the front. The upper 7 pairs of ribs attached to the sternum with costal cartilage are known as true ribs. The 8th through 10th ribs are non-costal cartilage which connects them to the ribs above, and for this they are known as false rib. The last 2 ribs are called floating ribs because they do not attach to the sternum or to other ribs and simply hang free. The length of each rib increases from number 1 to 7 and then decreases until rib pair number 12. First rib is the shortest, broadest, flattest, and the most curved. In this image, we can see the 1 to 7 pairs of ribs are directly attached with the sternum, so they are known as true ribs, and then the last 8 to 12 pair of ribs are false ribs, and the last 2 ribs are floating ribs. They are not attached with the sternum. In this image we can see the structure of each rib having the one rounded end and the flat end. Next is sternum. The sternum or the breastbone is a long flat bone located in the central part of the chest. It connects to the ribs via cartilage and forms the front of the rib cage, thus helping to protect the heart, lungs, and major blood vessels from injury. Shaped roughly like a necktie, it is one of the largest and the longest flat bones of the body. Its three regions are the manubrium, the body, and xiphoid process. In this image, we can see the three parts of the sternum. The upper handle part is manubrium, and then the middle blade part is body, and the last blunt cartilaginous lower tip is xiphoid process. Next is hyoid bone. The hyoid bone, or also known as lingual bone or tongue bone, is a horseshoe shaped bone situated in the interior midline of the neck between the chin and the thyroid cartilage. At rest, it lies at the level of the base of the mandible in the front and the third cervical vertebra behind. Hyoid bone is classed as a irregular bone having the central part known as body and a pair of horns. These larger horns are greater horns and these are lesser horns. Next we are discussing vertebral column. The vertebral column, also known as backbone or spine, is part of the axial skeleton. In human beings, vertebral column, there are normally 33 vertebrae. The vertebral column consists of 5 parts. The most cranial, uppermost part is made up by the cervical vertebrae, followed by thoracic, then lumbar, sacral, and coccygeal vertebrae. Cervical vertebrae make up the junction between the vertebral column and the cranium. Sacral and coccygeal vertebrae are fused and thus often called sacral bone or coccygeal bone as unit. The sacral bone makes up the junction between the vertebral column and the pelvic bones. In this image, we can see the total number of 33 bones. Then, a formula indicating the number of vertebrae in each segment of the spine column for humans, it is C7, T12, L5, S5 and C4. Total number of bones are 33. The letters denoting C for cervical, T for thoracic, L for lumbar, S for sacral and C for coccyx. Now we are discussing structure of a typical vertebrae. In human vertebral column, the size of the vertebrae varies according to the placement in the vertebral column. Each vertebrae is an irregular bone. Each vertebra has a body which consists of a large anterior middle portion called the centrum and the posterior vertebral arc called a neural arc. The vertebral arc is formed by pedicles and laminae. Two pedicles extend from the sides of the vertebral body to join to the body to the arc. From each pedicle, a broad plate, a lamina, projects backward. Above and below the pedicles are shallow depressions called vertebral notches. When the vertebrae articulate, the notches align with those on adjacent vertebrae and these form the openings of the intervertebral foramina. The foramina allows the entry and exit of the spinal nerves from each vertebra together with associated blood vessels. The articulating vertebrae provide a strong pillar of support for the body. In this image, we can see the structure of a typical vertebrae. There are 7 processes projecting from the vertebra. 1 spinous process, 2 transverse processes, and 4 articular processes. Now first one is cervical vertebrae. There are 7 cervical vertebrae designated as C1 through C7. These bones are inguinal, small and delicate. Their spinous processes are short. C1 is also called the atlas and C2 is also called the axis. Next is thoracic vertebra. The 12 thoracic vertebrae and their transverse process have surface that articulate with the ribs. The 5 lumbar vertebrae are the largest of the vertebrae, and lumbar vertebrae are located between the rib cage and the pelvis and are the largest of the vertebrae. Sacral vertebrae. There are 5 sacral vertebrae S1 to S5 which are fused in maturity into one large bone, the sacrum, with no intervertebral discs. The sacrum with the ilium forms a sacroiliac joint on each side of the pelvis which articulates with the hips. In this image we can see the sacrum that these 5 bones are fused. The last one is coccygeal vertebrae. The last 3 to 5 coccygeal vertebrae, usually 4, make up the tailbone or the coccus. There are no intervertebral discs. Thank you so much.